Hey up YouTube, this is episode 3 of this series looking at the map of Knockemdine district from the book Arthur Crate in Staffordshire by Alan Povey and Andy Ridler. If you haven't seen episodes 1 and 2, I'll post a link so you can watch them at your leisure. I'd recommend watching episode 1 because it contains a bit more context. Today we'll be looking at the top left of the map, which is the area heading east out of Knockemdine and into the countryside towards Derbyshire. Right, let's get on. We'll start off just on the right of Knockemdine at Weston Wood. This little oasis of greenery just off Weston Coyney Road always was and still is popular with locals wanting to escape the bustle of the town. Green spaces such as this would have been a godsend for those who lived in the black, smoke-filled industrial town or spent a lot of the time down the local pits. One of the few surviving partly natural woods in the city of Stoke-on-Trent, the 27-hectare Weston Wood was made an area of special scientific interest in 2006 and is home to a diverse range of flora and fauna. It's now managed by the Woodland Trust and the City Council, along with a few other woodland sites nearby on the former Park Hall estate. If we carried on in this direction, we'd be heading out of the city towards Fosbruck, Dillon and Cheadle. Fosbrook refers to Forsbrook, and Dillon as Dilhorne. These are smaller towns and villages just outside of the city. And finally we got Chaydull, which is Cheadle, a small town with a magnificent church designed by renowned architect Augustus Pugin. Pugin's more famous for designing the interior of the Palace of Westminster and its famous clock tower. You might have heard of it. But this church is known locally as Pugin's Gem and is considered a showpiece of his artistic genius. We're going to stay inside the city for now though, and we'll wet a whistle at Knockemdine's. Knockemdine's, or just plain Knocks to the locals, is the nickname of the Auctioneer's arms in Caverswall. I assume this nickname comes from the sound of an auctioneer's gavel, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. The pub's still going strong in 2025. I've never actually been in, but I'm very tempted after seeing the food on their website. Just up from Knockemdine's is a building that would be pretty tough to knock down, Caverswall Castle. Caverswall Castle is a fortified 17th century mansion, incorporating parts of an earlier medieval structure. Likely built on the mound of an existing Anglo-Saxon Motte and Bailey style castle, it was probably rebuilt in stone in the 1200s, and the then owner, William of Caverswall, applied for a licence to fortify it in 1275. Its history is quite patchy in the following centuries, but it came back to prominence in the 1600s when it was bought by a wealthy merchant, and also Member of Parliament Matthew Craddock, and the house was rebuilt as a mansion by renowned architect Robert Smithson. Fresh off being rebuilt, it was captured a few decades later by the parliamentarian forces during the English Civil War, and it was even threatened with demolition to prevent its use by the enemy. Luckily, this order was never carried out. After the war, and the parliamentarian victory, royalist lands, including Caverswall, were confiscated and sold off. This led to yet another change of ownership. This would be the first of many over the coming centuries. The castle's since been everything from a nunnery to a holiday let up until the present day. It was last sold in 2021 for an undisclosed fee, after the previous owner met with many frustrations over planning permission for just about everything, the building being Grade 1 listed. Nonetheless, it's still a very nice building, and it's still got a lot of its original features, including its moat. And its dungeon, if that's more your bag. Moving swiftly on, we'll go from castles to pyramids, sort of, as we head towards Cinderhill. Cinderhill, to give it its posh name, was, as the name suggests, quite literally a looming black hill that looked like it was made of cinders. Some of it probably was. It was actually the spoil tip belonging to Park Hall Colliery. Interestingly, the building in the foreground, known as Cinderhill Hall, actually belonged to Mossfield Colliery and Adderley Green. More on that later. And it was occupied by their colliery manager. These days, Cinderhill is better known for the industrial estate that occupies the former site of the colliery, and the hill's no longer the looming black pyramid that it once was, it being levelled after Park Hall Colliery closed in the 1960s. The spoil from the huge mound was spread out, and the current housing estates around it were built on top of it. Just on the other side of Cinderhill, we come to Park Hall Lake. Park Hall has a long and rich history going back to the medieval period, when the land was owned by the Coyney family that give their name to the namesake area nearby. In the 17th century, the hall was purchased by the Parker family of Derbyshire, and the house was listed for tax purposes as a sizable estate with no less than 10 hearths. The hall has so much history that it's very difficult to summarise in this short video, but the hall survived into the 19th and 20th centuries, with the owners exploiting the estate's industrial potential in the Victorian era, operating a colliery for nearly 100 years that merged with Florence Pit in the 1960s. The hall and estate wore many hats in its later years, from being used as a store of treasures in World War II to being a leisure retreat in the 50s and 60s. The house was demolished in the 1970s after being gutted by a Great Fire, and it's a great loss to the area's heritage. But the lake's still there, as is the ice house and a few other features, now a popular walking area for residents of the adjoining housing estates, and it's an area with plenty of wildlife. Park Hall Country Park is on the other side of the road, and it's a site of great geological interest. Both are worth a visit. Moving out of the city again, we'll travel on the Leek to Buxton road, and we'll come across the Thray Shews. The Three Horse Shoes is a pub in Blackshaw Moor, and it's been around quite a long time, getting a lot of passing trade on this very busy road across the Staff's moorlands. It's still very much active today. Now it's a popular wedding venue and function venue featuring a 4-star hotel and a spa. There are a few more interesting Potteries translations of names of places around here. Leek refers to Leek, a lovely little market town a stone's throw away from Stoke-on-Trent that was once connected to the city by rail, and could be again in future, if the local authorities ever get round to it. The amusingly named Cellarhead refers to the village of Cellarhead, where you'd usually pass over a crossroads on the way to either Leek or Cheadle. It's part of the Green Belt that was set out in the 1960s to prevent the ever-expanding Stoke-on-Trent from gobbling up the surrounding villages. The equally amusing Waterhouses is the Potteries name for the Waterhouses on the A523 from Leek to Ashbourne. The biggest local landmark around there is the tarmac works in Calden that sticks out like a sore thumb nearby. And lastly, we've got Dovedale, a popular destination for Stokies to escape the stresses and strains of city life in the Peak District, just on the border of Staffordshire and Derbyshire. Just outside Ashbourne, it's an area of outstanding natural beauty, with popular landmarks such as the Doveholes Caves and stepping stones. In the 20th century, as car ownership became a thing, many Stokies would head out to Dovedale on summer weekends for a picnic and a paddle in the river. We're going to turn around again now and head back into Stoke-on-Trent, back past Parko, and in towards Neck End. On the way, we'll pass through Adley Green. Adderley Green was originally a small hamlet on the Park Hall estate that was made more prominent in the 19th century when the turnpike road that's now Anchor Road was built running straight through it. A railway line soon followed, in fairly quick succession, leading to its rapid industrialisation, and it eventually became part of the borough of Longton and part of Stoke-on-Trent itself in 1922. The main industry was originally coal, with the mines of Mossfield and Adderley Green being opened in the Victorian era. Adderley Green Colliery is infamous for an incident in 1860 in which 5 miners were instantly killed, the youngest of whom was only 14 years old. The accident had been caused by a series of events involving a rail falling into the pit shaft and getting stuck. This caused a descending cage to crash into it, hurling the 5 passengers a further 23 metres to their deaths. Predictably, the inquest found the owners of the colliery not to be at fault, and no further charges were pressed. Mossfield Colliery was also the site of 2 major explosions, one in 1889 and another in 1940. The explosion in 1889, attributed to coal dust, left 77 dead, with several bodies never recovered. The explosion of 1940 was attributed to fire damp, and led to 11 fatalities. Mossfield Colliery closed in 1963, and Adderley Green closed not long after. The site of the collieries is now an industrial estate, and the spoil heap has since been reduced and forms part of the Berryhill Millennium Park. The other major works in the area was Richard's Tile Works, founded in the 1950s, that was a major employer in the area. It closed in the late 90s, with the site now taken up by a housing estate. Next up, we move into Bentilee. Bentilee was a largely unremarkable semi-rural area up until the post-war period, when it became the site of one of the largest council estates not just in the city, but in the whole of Europe, with the ambitious social housing projects consisting of some 4,500 new homes. It opened to much fanfare, with many of the residents of Longton's crumbling Victorian slums marvelling at the new modern houses, surrounded by green space, and complete with all mod cons such as hot and cold running water, central heating, and indoor toilets. A shining example of the better world that the post-war governments wanted to build for future generations. It's gone through a few more regeneration schemes over the years with mixed results, and after Right to Buy came in the 1980s, many of the houses transferred to private ownership. Like many large council estates, it's seen its share of troubles with drugs and antisocial behaviour, but it also boasts a proud community spirit, and many long-term residents are still proud to call it home. Lastly, we arrive at Limekiln Bonk. Limekiln Bank is a great road to test your handbrake on. The road declines steeply from Hanley heading into Bucknell, and these days the junction where Bucknell Road crosses Leek Road is known for its very busy set of traffic lights and near-perpetual roadworks. In the early 20th century it was a very busy area, with the road, the canal and the railway all running through it in close proximity. There was also the contrast of the Ivy House industrial estate with the green oasis of Finney Gardens. Bucknell and Northwood Railway Station was part of the Biddulph Valley Line, and it closed in 1962. Interestingly, the track is still there, although it would be very hard to find under all of that wild vegetation. Ironically, as the railway declined, the then disused canal found new life. Caldon Canal, a branch of the main Trent and Mersey Canal, was opened in 1779, and thanks to restoration efforts in the 1960s and 70s, it's still navigable today. The main businesses around here now are car dealerships. And that concludes episode 3. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like if you did. Next time we'll move over towards Stoke as we head west, so if you haven't yet, please subscribe so you don't miss it. And I'll see thee soon.